All right, it is 5 o'clock, and we're going to get the meeting started pretty soon. If you haven't gotten a chance to sign in, please go ahead and catch the QR code in the bottom corner. If you haven't got a chance to do the cyber challenge yet, go ahead and grab that code too. We'll give you all about 5 minutes to sign in, and then we'll push on. I guess probably would work, but yeah, you can just listen to it. Also, why is it Apple Wallet? Just like the cyber challenge, scan it, get hacked. No, this isn't the Coinbase commercial. Wait, you need the funny installed virus once you try and pirate it. Wait, I don't even like the point now where actually that you pirated that they would totally try to.
Why is that not just software, but literally just malware?
Why is it not?
It's like teachers.
Why is it not active?
Where's that executed?
Yeah.
Like it's a shitty one because like the silver like people that way.
Because
Exactly.
so you get this access.
Yeah. Once you get something like 2022 week tutorial. All right, gonna get a mic check in Zoom. Can y'all hear me? Yep, everyone's saying good. Awesome. Does anyone still need QR codes up front? No? All right, let's get the meeting started then. I'd like to go ahead and welcome y'all to this week's meeting. Wait, quiet in the front, please. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Once again, QR code. Gonna breeze past this. We already decided we don't need it. All right. Today's topics. We'll be going over some announcements. We're going to go through the previous week's cyber challenge solution. We're going to do current events with Caleb. I'm going to run y'all through lockpicks and do a short demo on lockpicking. Then we're going to get into introduction to SCADA with Cole. All right, so we're going to talk about NCAA cyber games a little bit more in depth than we have in the past couple of weeks. We're going to breeze through Wicked 6, NSA Tech Talks. We got another one coming up, I think, on the 22nd, but we'll get into that. And DEF CON 30, y'all have asked for additional info, so we're going to go through some of that too. All right, so the NCAA cyber games registration closed Thursday. So if you didn't get registered before, unfortunately, you're going to miss out on this one. All teams from a school compete on the same day. We're entering multiple teams. Each region may have multiple rounds of competition depending upon how many teams they're fielding and how many of the schools are able to compete at the given time they're scheduled for. Each region competes against itself. Our most experienced team will not be competing on behalf of UCF, but as a control team for the event. In the early events for NCAE, the very first region, they actually had some difficulties getting their environment set up at all. And the red team actually didn't engage as a red team, but instead helped the members stand things up and get things sorted out. So this is definitely one of the beginner-friendly and beginner-oriented challenges. So the Northwest and Northeast regionals was on the 12th of February. I got the winners posted up there. Southwest regional and Midwest regional are going on this weekend, and our region, Southeast, is going on the 26th. We did previously have a workshop scheduled for that weekend, but we're going to scrub and push that for a later weekend so we can do this. If there is a second round of regionals for each region, the dates listed here will be them, but they're tentatively scheduled now. It looks like we might have a few of the earlier regions that might get a second round, but it's likely that we will not. All right, so who are we competing against? It'll be us against UWF, Augusta University out of Georgia, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University out of Florida, University of Alabama, Huntsville, Middle Georgia State University, Montreat College out of North Carolina, and the University of South Florida is entering a team as well. If you did enter and register for an event, your name should be up on this board. If your name is not on one of these teams, you are not slotted to compete right now. If there are issues with that, if you've been working with someone, you should probably reach out and talk to them. We've got the NITSEC UCF, which will be our exhibition team. We've got UCF 01 and 02. Captains are Harrison Keating and myself. If you see your name on UCF 02, please hit me up. You'll also be getting an email from me directly on where to start organizing. And I believe Harrison has reached out, but I will double check with him to make sure that everyone that's on that team has been contacted. Cool. Talking about Wicked 6 real quick. Same information going through. They're still getting ready to organize. You should register for this if you want to have kind of a fun remote style event. Looks like it'll be a good chance to hear from some larger companies, Microsoft. A lot of networking in the Discord should be pretty good for getting in touch with people or finding out more about different events that are kind of in that same scope. Virtual escape rooms and CTFs seem like fun. Attack and Defend, I haven't heard much about that one, but that should be pretty cool too. Lots of prizes and some merchandise apparently. So the NSA CAE Cyber Talk that's coming up next is policy on February 22nd, as well as the 24th, if you missed the one on the 22nd. Just to confirm, Tom, that is at 8 o'clock? 7:30. 7:30, as at 7:30. You don't need to be competing in NCX or any competition to attend. This is just for your information provided by the NSA. Should be pretty good. All right, now on to DEF CON. If you haven't gotten a chance to fill out the interest form, this is your first meeting, or you haven't been to one lately, and you need a chance to go ahead and grab that QR code, fill out the information, let us know what's up. But we're going to get into some of the other stuff. We've got a couple of questions that have come back on forums. So if you answer this, this is how you're, if you ask this is how you're going to get your answer. And if you've been thinking this, hopefully it'll help you out too. So general excitement. We got a lot of people that are in love for the event. Basically, everyone that filled out the form is 100% behind us going as a group. So that's great. Looks like we will be doing this after all. So if you're a graduate student or if you're an undergraduate student and you graduate, can you attend? And the answer is yes. So long as you are a registered student and you are part of UCF, we can help get you funding for the event. So graduate students are totally welcome. How did we arrive at $1,500 bucks? So originally you might have remembered that it was a $1,200 assumption, and we went back and realized that maybe that was a little bit lowballing it. The price for the DEF CON badge itself is about $350 bucks. We are hopeful that they will be offering those for sale, pre-sales like they did in the last 2 years. Traditionally, this has been kind of a difficult thing to arrange because that cost has been charged at door, so you can't actually reserve one. But hopefully we're going to get a hybrid event like we had the last couple of years, and we will be able to purchase these. I think that we ended up having a big chunk of this, about I think 700-ish of it, $750 of it ended up going just to hotel rooms. We're getting the reserved blocks in the actual hotels for the event itself. So instead of having to wake up, head downstairs, catch a cab for 30 minutes to get to the con, you'll essentially be right there within like walking distance of all of the different rooms and whatnot. So that's part of that. There's also airfare that you have to keep in mind. Flying into Vegas is relatively cheap. Flying out of Vegas is not relatively cheap. And when you're purchasing everyone together, we have to get a group rate settled on. The yearler that we can get, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get a better rate. Those rates go up and down, and we're assuming the highest cost for those, it may be lower, but at least we'll know that we'll be covered. But yeah, so admission, shared room, and if we can get a voucher for meals as well, that will be included too. So everyone will get a chance to eat without having to pay out of pocket, if we can swing it. All right, before we go on to the Cyber Challenge solution from last week, were there any questions in chat, or does anyone have any questions about what we just covered on the DEF CON slide?
Nothing in chat.
Nope, awesome, cool. All right, you want to come up and tell us a little bit about the Cyber Challenge last week?
All right, so we had OSINT last week. I hope everyone had a chance to work with it. It was pretty simple. It was a Twitter profile under a name, and if you know, there were some hints towards what way you can lead. So there is this website, OSINT Frameworks. It does have a lot of tools that are openly available. It's just listed there. Some of the tools, I do have to say, are not maintained at like now, but they are pretty good, still works. But here we have, it says, I love being on social media platforms. So what we can do is, we know the username, we can try and figure out if there are any other profiles that we can work with. As you can see, there are no following, no followers, no tweets. So there's nothing that we can work on here. If you're looking at, I used Sherlock because that's what I like. It is very informative, and it does have a bunch of tweaks to it. So I use Sherlock. As you can see, there were some bunch of usernames, profiles that were available. We had Facebook, we had Twitter, Pastebin, Instagram. The one that I used for the challenge, if you explore all of them, you may be familiar with it, was the Instagram. So we have the Instagram profile here. There was only one post. If you go to the post, you can see there was a link. It says, here's a cool project that I was talking to you about. So that was a cool project. That links to GitHub. Now, if people use a GitHub, they will know that there is something called commits. There are no flags here, but it says I used to keep flags here by mistake, I guess. But if you look at it in the commits, there were nothing in the commits because it was a secret. So there was a hint there as well. It said way back. So there is a website, archive.org, that takes you back on the website. It is pretty cool to go back there, and you can look at any website in the past. How was it and what was there? So we have that there. If you put the website, the GitHub website, you would be able to find the flag there. So that was pretty much what it was. So there we go. We have our flag. Thank you.
All right. Once again, I'm going to give a shout out to our friends over at Cyber Florida, who host the No Password Required podcast. Talked about this a little bit last week and going to continue talking about it the rest of the semester. If you're looking for just kind of like a slice of life look into what it's like being in cybersecurity as a professional and how people went through a career to get to the top level positions that they're at now, this is a fantastic opportunity for you to check out. The interviews are really good. I like the content. They got a couple of people up there who, if you don't know, you should. They got Rachel Toback, Roger Grimes, Shane Young, super awesome content. So if you get a chance during the week, you want to check these out, you want to check out a new podcast, you should check out the No Password Required podcast. All right, and now we're on to current events.
Well, hello there. So what do we have for current events? Emotet has come back once again, and in this case, it's with very funny Excel documents. So this was a previous banking Trojan in 2014, and it's reappeared again as a binary link. So what you had is an Excel that was very malicious, and in one of the cells, you had a very weird HTML link that automatically ran once you opened the document. So when it was opened, it would install PowerShell, and then it'd go and retrieve the Emotet binary and install it onto your computer. This is very dangerous, and thankfully, Microsoft actually removed the M6, which is the Microsoft Software Installer handler, to prevent people from actually exploiting this. So you can't really do this anymore. Also, another thing was this link right here. They even changed it again to use octet IP addresses instead of regular binary, or not binary, but the regular form of your IP addresses. Grafana is next, and they are a platform that allows you to view analytics for monitoring of applications. And these had a cross-site request forgery attack with a CVE of 8.1. And this allowed users to exploit cross-site scripting to gain higher level access and PrivEsk into a higher platform, and then they could use this to continue to wreak havoc on whoever had this had a more vulnerable version of Grafana. Thankfully, a lot of the most newer versions, I think from 7.5 and up, have gotten patched, so you don't have to worry about this anymore as long as you update your software. And then New Zealand also has decided to get more bug bounties. So with this, they introduced the vulnerability disclosure policies, and it is up to the discretion of each department in New Zealand to find out what information that they will handle. And that means that the vulnerabilities that have been released to the individual departments have to be fixed within 90 days. So you can't have people going and just a security researcher goes and finds out an exploit, and then it just never gets patched like 60, 90, 120 days later. And then it just gets put on the open internet, and then people can exploit it. And then that is it for current events today. It's been a pretty slow week.
Should have mentioned the Coinbase QR code.
Oh yeah, Coinbase. All right, so tool time this week, I will be going over locks and picks. At a brief high-level view, we'll be doing another meeting for overall PhysTech later on in the semester. So if you don't know how a lock works, this GIF up here shows you how a lock is supposed to work with a key, right? We're going to go through a bunch of different types of locks and key styles and how those work. But this is the most common. This is your typical like residential pin and tumbler lock. The key interacts with key pins. Those key pins interact with spring pins, and they form a shear line. When that shear line is set correctly, the tumbler will turn freely, and that's how you unlock the door or whatever. Before we get into that, we got to go over some like brief stuff because I'm talking about lock picks. You should all know like what is legal and what's not legal. So every state that you see in green is legal by statute. A slightly darker green, which unfortunately is kind of difficult to see here, my bad guys, are legal due to any lack of actual substantial statute. That means that there isn't a law in the books that says they're legal, but there's not a law in the books that say that they're not legal. If you do something illegal with the tool, it doesn't matter because of the tool, it matters because of what you did. States in yellow are picks are legal, but caution is merited because there have been overreaches by law enforcement officers in the past that kind of like have pushed that in a little bit of a murky like gray zone. And the one state in orange, laws are ambiguous and specific context should be considered. Basically in this one, don't travel with lockpicks unless you want to have a really long conversation with people that can get you in a lot of trouble. All right, so a couple of points for your own safety. Don't pick a lock you don't own. Don't do it. Don't pick a lock you depend on because that's a bad idea. Don't abuse any knowledge that you gain. Obviously, common sense should be common, but it's not. All right, so a couple of key points here. Pin tumbler locks. We've got the most common style of lock. That's the one that I introduced you to in the beginning. As you can see, you've got like section in the middle picture. Section 2 are your key pins. Section 1 are your driver pins or spring pins. 5 is the key itself. The shear line is demonstrated by 6, and it rotates on the bottom section. The picks to the left of the screen, you'll see are a bunch of different like shapes and styles and sizes. They all have a very specific use case. On the very far edge, you'll see rakes. You've got a city rake and a snake rake. Those are for not picking pins one by one, but instead trying to do the entire lock in a scraping motion to get them all to just set on their own. And then on the other side, you'll see a couple of L-shaped tools. Those are tension wrenches, and you use those to tension the lock so that you can get the driver pins to bind above the shear line. So high level overview there. That's where we depart from like common stuff that you've probably seen before. What you got up here are dimple locks, and they're pin tumbler locks, just a different variation. Instead of all the pins being set on the edge of the key, they're set on the flat of the key. And the different depth associated is where the shear line gets set. I've got two different styles of pin tumbler locks shown here. We've got with the red on the handle of the key. You can see that there are multiple rows that look essentially as if you take like your standard pin tumbler key and turn it sideways and stacked a couple of them side by side. The other are just holes that are drilled in. They both have different levels of use. The picks for these are shown on the far left top. They look like little flags, and the idea is that you will go through and you will massage each driver key pin one by one up until you can get it to bind. Shown below those with the blue handles are different styles of rakes for these pins. Basically the same thing as the other rakes that I showed you, just a different format. We also have some warded locks. These are kind of more common in padlocks by themselves. I haven't seen many of them that are actually used in like a door lock, and certainly would be considered more of a specialty style of lock. The picks for these are just basically really, really simple keyways that get past the warding itself. What it means when it's a warded lock is there are gates that exist inside the body of the lock itself, and only the right cutout of the key will pass the warding. So you can pick these, as far as I'm aware, you can pick these all at once. As long as you can get the lock itself to rotate, you have picked the lock. Tubular pin locks are similar to, the mechanism is similar to your common locks, but the issue is instead of the pins dropping downward, they're facing towards you. This requires a very specific style of pick, as you can see on the left-hand side. And what you do is essentially set all these to their deepest setting, insert the pick into the lock, and gently rotate it until each one falls into the shear zone or shear line for the tubular pin lock, and then it should rotate freely. This is not really a pick as much as it is a really, really advanced rake. So essentially it's just all based on like your technique. Some of these open really, really easily. Some of these are almost impossible to open unless you're very, very lucky. But they are a lot of fun to play with. You'll find these on like locking cabinets in places like department stores. You'll find them on filing cabinets. You'll see them for vending machines, pretty common. But their use case outside of that is pretty limited. All right, so we've got wafer and tumbler locks. If anyone has a car, this is your automotive style lock. It's for car doors and your ignition, more often than not. The way that this works is similar to your residential locks, where everything is tensioned to reset on its own. Instead of having a shear line that you raise all of the pins to, you're essentially trying to configure these wafers to spread apart into the correct setting. The picks for this, once again, very much are more similar to rakes. You wouldn't really single pin pick this. I guess you could, but realistically, you tension the lock and then you hit it with the rake until it pops free, and then you're good to go. I think we've got, and the last one here are disc tumbler locks. These are a little bit more advanced of a lock. They're also known as disc detainer locks, the more common term that you see, but they are classified as a tumbler lock. The way that this works is you've got a bunch of different angled cuts on the key, and they line up and catch discs as they rotate through. One of the great features of disc detainer locks is that they have a bunch of false gates, typically in the most common of locks that exist, making them incredibly difficult to pick. So difficult, in fact, that a bunch of industry pros got together and decided they were going to design a pick specifically for this. And it is produced by Sparrow. Bosnian Bill and Lockpicking Lawyer got together to make this. It's a fantastic pick, really, really well built. There are some similar ones to it on the market, but they tend to be very cheaply manufactured and are prone to breakage very easily. They also don't come with depth settings or ways for you to determine when you have the pick set at the right depth. But we're not going to get too far into that. But these would be like considered the most difficult to pick locks out of all the ones that I've shown you so far. All right, now we're going to do a demo and hope that this goes well. It should. All right, you see the dot cam and Zoom. Can you see the dot cam? I don't think so. No, of course not. Let's try this.
Dot cam connected to the PC.
I think so.
What?
Awesome. What could go wrong, right? Let's see here if I can start video.
Is there not an app to control that dot cam?
I mean, the dot cam is controlled here for the screen.
I need on the.
You see, there's always the solution of someone joining on the phone and just putting a camera.
Right.
I'm guessing that that camera just goes to another input to protect, not the PC. Yeah, I know some places.
There we go. Oh, that's not the right camera.
We're getting closer.
I mean, psyched.
All right. Is this? No, that's that. Oh, okay, cool. So maybe we can just do that. Maybe, hopefully.
There we go.
Is that good enough? All right, we're gonna try to do this. All
It's
right,
upside down, but good enough.
it's upside down.
You might be able to bend the actual dot cam down. That's not the
Block is now visible with the 940.
All right.
that we can't see. Oh, wow.
This is, all right,
No.
Jesus. Not going well at all. All right, how about that? Is that stable?
It's stable, but now the audience can't see.
Right, we can see your webcam.
Open up camera.mbxc.
Somewhat. No, wait, hold on.
Oh, you know, it's actually upside down.
There we go.
There
Okay.
we go.
All right, now we're right side up. We good?
Yes.
All right, cool.
There we go.
All right, so what we have here is the tool. It's reversed. I can't do anything about that. So TOL is the Open Organization of Lockpickers, and they provide a fantastic set of 3 and 6 locks that have the number of pins that is associated with the number on the lock for you to practice picking. I really like these. I prefer these to the acrylic picks or the acrylic locks because they provide the correct feedback. Acrylic locks tend to develop a lot of slippage so that you can accidentally get the lock to pop even when it shouldn't. And unfortunately, it also doesn't provide you enough actual feedback when you're using your lockpicks to determine when you actually have a pin set and when you don't. This really isn't much of an issue when you're using standard pins, but when you get into more of like a security pin, like particularly spools, it becomes a major issue. But we'll go into more of that when we do the lockpicking workshop. All right, so what you got here is the face of the lock, right? This is your keyway. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take your tension wrench, you're gonna stick it into the lock at the very bottom of the keyway. Let's see that. right? And then you're just going to apply tension depending upon like your specific picking style. You might do light tension or heavy tension. If you are familiar with lockpicking lawyer, he is one of the individuals who uses a lot of like high tension. So he bends tension wrenches pretty quickly and easily. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your pick, right? And with the point of that pick, you see that, hopefully, there we go. Point of the pick, you're going to hit the pins and you're going to try to pop them up one by one in sequence, preferably from the back to the front. But your style may vary until eventually like you get the lock to pop. So I'm going to do that. Insert all the way to the back of the pick or all the way to the back of the lock. And I'm going to go through and hit each pin one at a time while applying tension. And hopefully, if my demo goes well, it should pop free just like that. Now, that might not seem like much, but you would be surprised at the amount of common locks that only have like 3 pins to them. Some as much as 6, some even more, going up to like 10 picks in a row, sometimes stacked double side by side. The same idea applies all the way through from 1 to 10 or more. If you can do a 3-pin lock, you can do a 10-pin lock, not a problem. I hope that everyone learned quite a little bit about lockpicking, and we'll teach more if y'all want to learn more about this.
Comes the next meeting.
Quick question,
Yes.
where do you like to buy picks and supplies?
So question from audience was, where do I like to buy picks and supplies? So I like Sparrow, they provide a lot of really great products, but I've recently transitioned to liking a lot more of like Southward stuff. I think the quality on the picks is just the littlest bit higher, and it doesn't hurt that they're literally like in like local area. They're in Winter Park, I think, somewhere close by. So when they ship, when you buy from them, you're buying from local business. So I really like their stuff. I would advise you not to go on Amazon unless you really just want to buy a bunch of like really cheap stuff to get a feel for things. But in a pinch, it works. But yeah, buy high quality stuff, and it will be similar to what you'll face when you're out there. So
Something that's 5-piece kit cheaper than most of the Amazon ones and much higher quality.
yeah, so advice from the audience, Southward has a 5-piece kit that's actually cheaper than what you'll get on Amazon and is way higher quality. Awesome. There any other questions in chat or in the audience?
Do you want the name of the store?
I think I might spell.
Southford, Southord.
There we go.
Cool. Anybody else? Awesome. Well, thank you for your time.
One comment from Sachin, a lot of locks are designed for peace of mind as opposed to like keeping someone out. It's a form of security theater, in other words.
True.
And also John Andrews, seconds, I think it was the Southward locks, or kit, and I will also go back.
It's PXS05.
Right, here's some resources if you want to check out. I'll post these in the Discord after the meeting today.
Is this mic right here? Is this mic right here?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Hey everyone, my name's Cole. I have been getting really into SCADA security. It's essentially the stuff that runs all our factories. If you've seen, robot arms where they're automatically constructing things, or chemicals automatically being mixed, that's all SCADA. It's a supervisory control and data acquisition. Basically a way to manage a lot of machines all at the same time without any need for really any human interaction. Most of the protocols were made in like the 70s to 90s and are very exploitable and are very high risk as far as vulnerabilities go, due to the fact that they are controlling heavy machinery, dangerous chemicals. You could actually end up accidentally killing someone if you mess around with this. Also, preface real quick, don't play with these things if it's not yours. Like, this goes double for this because it could lead to someone actually dying, which none of us want, right?
Even if you do own it, probably not the best idea to mess with it, because then you can die.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Jeffrey. So yeah, we're just gonna go through a quick example of some like the sort of effects that this can have. if you've heard of Stuxnet, it was a big thing back in 2010. It was when it was originally discovered. It was a massive virus that was originally targeting a Iranian nuclear facility. It was targeting their gas centrifuge specifically, which was used for enriching uranium. It ended up escaping containment of the Iranian facility and infecting 200,000 computers and causing like actual physical damage to 1,000 separate machines around the world. The way they got in, this was a joint effort between the US and Israeli government. It was called Operation Olympic Games. So they dropped 4 separate 0 days to do this. They had a USB stick, which was infected with a shortcut file, which as soon as you looked at it, it would automatically execute code on your computer. It would drop a worm. That worm would propagate itself to 3 other computers, and then it would start checking what you had on your computer. If you didn't have this software called Siemens S7, it's used to control programmable logic controllers, so the things that are actually running all of their machinery. If you didn't have it, it would just go dormant, done at that point. It just sort of sits there waiting. If it doesn't meet that criteria, it'll infect the Siemens software and wait for you to connect yourself to the programmable logic controller, at which point it goes into the logic controller, installs a rootkit on it, and spoofs everything that's coming out of that so that you can't see that it's doing anything. After it does that, it will basically just sit on that logic controller. It'll check for a specific kind of device that was used to control gas centrifuges. There's a very specific range that it runs at that they only use for gas centrifuges. And essentially it would sit there, and every so often it would just drop the motor's power to 0, max it out, and then go back to normal. And then it would hide itself via spoofing the traffic that was coming off of that. And then I'm spreading to one of the engineers in the facility's laptop, which he brought home and plugged into the internet, at which point it infected 200,000 separate computers, caused like catastrophic damage of like 1,000 different devices. It was a really ugly attack. It was going on for almost 8 years before it was actually discovered in 2010. It originally started in 2002. And it was estimated to have cost about $1 million to develop, apparently. So yeah, ICS attacks. These are becoming way more common. You see it a lot with ransomware gangs, partially because holding actual physical infrastructure hostage is much more effective than just digital assets. When you hold a city's power grid hostage, that's going to have a much different effect than, say, like, I don't know, a company's database. Has much more tangible fear factor to it. And that can also cause massive infrastructure damage. Like I said, if you take over a city's power grid, you can just wipe it out in like 5 minutes tops. And it can control systems that handle really dangerous materials. I heard from someone who works in the industry where they had their ICS system compromised, and the person who compromised it was going to essentially dump hydrogen monoxide and a bunch of, I believe the thing they were using in their production was hydrochloric acid, but they were basically going to dump it into the neighboring town if they did not pay up a ransom. That person was later door kicked by the FBI and arrested. So we're going to be talking about modbus. That's sort of the example protocol we're going to be using for this. It's the most common today. It's wildly exploitable. And if you run into a OT device in the wild, it's probably going to be running modbus. Sort of the most common one, got made back in 1979, hasn't changed since. In 1979, it was designed only to work on serial, but around the 90s, it was adapted to work over TCP/IP. It is completely unauthenticated. Anyone who's on the same network can issue commands, overwrite data, do whatever they want to it. And it's the main example we're going to be talking about. So I'm just going to give a quick crash course before we get into the exploitation section. So modbus essentially works on having input and output registers. It has one binary input register, which is just on or off, and one just normal input register, which is analog input, say sensor data about temperature, pressure, something along those lines. It also has holding registers and coils is what they refer to them as. Holding registers usually store configuration data, analog output, and coils are just like on and off. Like say you're toggling a motor, you're toggling a valve, something along those lines. And it works through client-server interaction. So you have like a modbus TCP server here, which is controlling, say, temperature controller and the operator interface. From up top there with the modbus TCP, we basically issue commands and overwrite data, which that then writes out to our temperature controller over serial. So, yeah, once again, I'm just going to let this play for a second. This was an example done back around, I think it was 2007, the video said, but this is sort of an example of how you can cause damage once you have access to an industrial control system and heavy machinery. One example that I've heard is basically overwriting configuration data for pressure vessels until it overloads itself and detonates. Gas tanks, that kind of stuff. And that's obviously very dangerous for the people who are working with it, and could potentially like cripple the infrastructure of towns, counties for however long it takes them to fix it. So yeah, so for our purposes, if we want to actually attack modbus, if we are on their network and want to do something to compromise it, say we're doing a red team operation, something along those lines. We ran into those during some of the C3 team stuff. I got into modbus after I started researching it for our CPTC competition, because one of the issues that we have with modbus systems is they are fragile. If you breathe on them the wrong way, they break. And if they break, they tend to break in ways that are very dangerous and will sort of cascade out, which would dock us a lot of points. So also all registers are unlabeled, which means you're essentially, unless you know what the registers are, you're essentially blindly shooting in the dark and hoping that it's correct. Also, some devices don't have a way to query device information. This is mostly ones that were designed to work over serial or aren't very recent. Data types are really limited. It only accepts like pretty limited range of integers as far as input or binary. And systems are most of the time hardwired and difficult to access, which we are going to talk about the hard to access physical access thing next week in our physical sec talk. So let's deal with some problems here. Unlabeled registers. So this is an example. This is just a little script I wrote. It's about like 10 lines of code. All it does is basically grab device information, which we can use to go, say, onto the company's manual and find, okay, this is what these things do. These are what these numbers actually mean. We can correlate this and figure out how we can exploit this from there. It's just one normal function call, and it will return a lot of information. And usually, depending on the device type, this obviously, I was just messing with my own random thing I was hosting on Python. But a lot of the time, it'll have some sort of label as to what it is meant to run or what it is meant to handle. So yeah. And if you are, say, a ransomware actor or something, the labeling might not matter. You might just override literally everything and just decide, I'm going to just decide, like, I don't know, I'm going to make everything break until you pay me $1 billion. So scanning is a major issue. If you have ever worked on network security where you are doing Nmap and trying to map out the network, that is a major issue. Especially for blue teams, actually. A lot of the time, they aren't able to do vulnerability scanning or monitoring traffic in certain ways because of the fact that these things will fall over under any amount of pressure. So my preferred way of doing it is basically doing an initial scan and finding what the devices are, sort of trying to fingerprint them and figure out what they can take, and excluding them from the main, like, the main scan, and then just sort of do like a rate limited, only on, like, say, web ports, like 80, 443, 8080, 8000, usually. But the thing is, you're often risking accidentally performing a denial of service attack and basically crashing everything, shutting it down for multiple minutes. One team at CPTC Nationals a couple years back performed an Nmap scan on a system that had a dam in it. It failed open and dumped an entire reservoir onto a city below. Simulated city. No one actually died, but this is a scanning utility I wrote. It's like 50 lines. It's not very well made, but it does the job well enough. So yeah, failure states. Basically, denial of service attacks are really easy to do as Modbus. These devices have been developed in like 1979 and are made to work with protocols from 1979. So a lot of the times they are not very well hardened. One pretty well-known thing is just if you send, I don't know, maybe like 10 packets per second at a Modbus device, it'll just fall over. Like it'll overwrite any other traffic that's trying to get to it. It's basically just unreachable. Also, because they are really old and they are not designed to handle this stuff, you can get a concerning amount of them to have a buffer overflow simply by sending a request that has like 4 bytes too many. It has no actual handling for that. There's also an exploit found around like 2016, I believe, that the read coils function code actually had a way that you could craft a packet that would cause the thing to just spontaneously crash. And that worked for basically any device at the time, which is not good, to say the least. So like, the next thing really is like hardwired. We don't have a way of accessing air gap networks particularly, unless we have physical access. We're going to talk about getting physical access next week. That's our PhysSec talk. But essentially, the way most people do it is either by doing like spray and pray, just dropping as many USBs outside, like sending phishing emails, trying to do something to compromise it from inside of the network, or basically connecting a device while they have temporary physical access, has like a 4G connection or something that you can use to send commands to that device, which then proxies it into the network. And it's just generally one of the most common, like most effective ways to stop yourself from having your factory just come grinding to a halt. So let's just talk about ways to counter some of these. It's gonna be pretty simple. Please just air gap your networks. Just don't, there's no reason there should ever be a Modbus device that's public facing. If you go on Shodan right now, you can find 30,000 devices that are public facing. Yes.
So you're saying it's a bad idea to have a development environment on the same network as a production Modbus network?
That was Jeffrey in the front asking, is it a bad idea to have a development environment as well as in the same environment as a production environment? Yes, please don't do that. Please. I am begging you all, if you are ever working with anything OT, just keep it to itself. There is no reason for it to ever talk to anything outside of itself. And that basically means that if someone wants to attack that, they need to have physical access to your facility, or have someone, like, I don't know, pay someone off. I guess if bribery is a thing, but something along those lines. It stops basically all network-based attacks. You can also just block traffic at the firewall. Because it's a factory, you have a known set of devices, and you can just stop traffic that's using Modbus that is coming from unknown devices. Just drop the packets. And that's generally the easiest way. Like if you can't air gap your network, please use a firewall. That's also a valid way of doing it. You can also do what our Cyberforce team did and use S-tunnel or Stunnel. Is it S-tunnel or Stunnel?
I think it's officially S-tunnel.
S-tunnel, okay. To essentially create a tunnel and encrypt the modbus traffic, which is usually unauthenticated and clear text, using SSL, send it to a separate port other than the modbus port, have that, decrypt it, transfer it to the normal one, and then do everything normally, and then drop everything else. The people at the competition argued that it wasn't practical, but it worked for them, so who am I to question it? So anyway, yeah, we're just gonna do a demo real quick. I will walk to my laptop real quick.
There was one question in the chat from Sachin. What if it gets lonely being air gapped?
So Sachin is asking, what if it gets lonely? It just has to cope until it becomes like, goes full, I have no mouth and I must scream. It will eventually turn on its creators, as all machines do. Could I get the ability to share my screen? So preface to this, this is a obviously incredibly simplified version of how systems work. It's bringing things that would be like dozens of registers down into being like 2. Literally, for the example, it's just 2 registers. So with that being said, going to share our screen. So the cloud wasn't enough to mine cryptocurrency. We needed more power, so we opened a private nuclear reactor off of I4. On the right, I have a little Ubuntu terminal. I have a simulated PLC running, so you can see it's trying to keep somewhere around the middle. Obviously, that's not how a nuclear reactor works. We're just going for an example here. So over here, oh wait, that's not my actual computer. Okay, cool. So what we're gonna do first is we're just gonna give it a little scan and see what it has. So I am going to apologize in advance because I wrote this program formatting for a very specific screen size. It is going to break the ASCII art pretty horrendously. I'm just apologizing in advance. But you can see we have our HackUCF PM 2.52. HackUCF.org is our vendor website. HackUCF nuclear controller, very secure model. So what we're going to do is we're going to boot up this little client program I wrote. So Python 3, single client.py. We put in the IP address we're connecting to. And we're just going to do a quick read. So we're not touching anything. We're not damaging anything yet. We're just going to read the first 2 addresses in the registry. And you can see we have our 250 and 350 for our minimum and maximum. That's currently the configuration information that it is using to manage our little nuclear reactor here. So let's say we wanted to blow up half of I4.
Improve, you said improve I4, right?
Yes. It's only, I don't think there's anything you could do to make I4 worse. I think turning it into a smoking crater is kind of an improvement.
Why stop there?
So what we're going to do is we are going to start, what was the chat? I don't know, either way. So
there said Cleric would. I don't think they like I4.
On the entire stretch from Tampa all the way to Claremont.
So if anyone is sensitive to flashing lights, it should be fine, but I'm just giving a fair warning just in case. We're gonna start overwriting things. So let's see here. Let's start by overwriting their maximum. It's just down to 9,999 degrees Celsius. And let's just up the minimum too, send it into panic. So we will go, I don't know, 9,950, just something a little bit more reasonable. It will now enter panic mode because it thinks it is underpowered, and it is going to ramp the temperature very quickly and We have reached nuclear meltdown. I4 has been reduced to a smoking crater. And HackUCF is no longer mining cryptocurrency on our private cloud. We have lost the amount of power that we needed. So yeah, that's sort of how like a really basic exploit works, is because on unauthenticated, you can just start sending commands. That's also, this is obviously hyperbolic. If you start messing around with it, it could actually cause like things to break in ways that are harmful to people. I have Matt in the front asking a question. Yes.
So if the nuclear reactor had a meltdown, why is the modbus still working?
Matt said if the nuclear reactor shut down, why is the modbus still working? That is because modbus is eternal. It is above all of our mortal petty concepts such as death and destruction. And it is simply better than us. So, so yeah, anyone got any questions? Yes.
From Sachin in the chat, what if you set the maximum before the minimum?
The maximum before the minimum? I did set the maximum before the minimum.
Below. Set the maximum below.
Oh, below the minimum. Okay, so the way I have the PLC set up, it's doing a really basic calculation of saying, I'm gonna take the maximum minus the minimum. Also, I did not program it to be able to handle negative temperatures. This is a demo, so it's very narrow, but it'll basically, it's taking the maximum temperature, subtracting minimum from the maximum temperature and dividing by 2 to get the center point between the two, and then subtracting that from the highest one. There's probably a more efficient way of doing it, but because it would be generating a negative number, it would actually think that it's trying to hit a target above the minimum or above the maximum by the distance between the maximum and the minimum. It's kind of scuffed. I'm going to be 100% honest. This was, it's a demo. It's a demo device. Any other questions? Oh, and I can stop sharing now. We can go back to the actual slides.
Take out the eyesore, or is it still there?
Eyesore is gone. Eyesore was blown into last week. So yeah, that is sort of the basics of how that exploitation works. It's super simple and is generally not the hardest thing in the world to get into. The protocol is super simple. There's really nice library for it called PyModbus. It literally boils it down to like 1 or 2 commands to be able to start sending and overwriting and reading stuff. It's really easy to also set up your own server with PyModbus and just mess around in your local network. That was how I set up the lovely nuclear reactor there. And yes, Jeffrey, rip I4. So yeah, if anyone has any other questions, I will take it, but otherwise, I think I am good. Yeah.
Awesome. Big thanks to Cole. That was great. Was not expecting the demo to be that in depth. So cool. Say what? Maybe a new iPhone. All right, so that wraps up our content for this week. It's a little bit short, but I hope you all took something away from this. Modbus is super cool. If you haven't joined operations, you want to come help us organize content, put new stuff out there. We meet every Tuesday at 8 p.m. in the Cyber Lab. You can also join us on Zoom for those as well. Don't have anything to talk about on projects right now. If you haven't joined our mailing list, you can join it at that address given. If you haven't checked out our shop, why not? Buy something fun. If you're not in the Discord, you should totally join the Discord. You can join using that QR code. And if you do the Twitter thing, we do the Twitter thing too. Thank you all very much. We really appreciate coming out, and have a great weekend.